Elena had always known something was wrong with her life, even if she couldn't name it. The feeling sat in her chest like a stone, heavy and cold, especially on mornings like this one, when she woke before dawn in the servants' quarters of the Montgomery mansion. Her room was barely larger than a closet. A narrow bed, a rickety dresser, and a single window that overlooked the garden where the Montgomery children had played while she watched from behind the glass. She was 31 now, but she had lived in this room since she was 5 years old. The memories before that were fragments. A woman's voice singing softly, the smell of jasmine, warm arms holding her close. And then nothing. Just the cold efficiency of Margaret Montgomery's instructions when Elena arrived at the estate. "You will work for your keep," Margaret had said, her voice sharp as broken glass. "We took you in when no one else would. You will be grateful." Grateful. That word had followed Elena through every year of her childhood. Grateful when she missed school to clean the bathrooms. Grateful when she ate her meals alone in the kitchen while the family dined in the grand hall. Grateful when she received hand-me-down clothes while the Montgomery daughters wore designer labels. James Montgomery, the patriarch, rarely spoke to her, but sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Not cruelty exactly, but something like regret. His wife Margaret, however, made her disdain crystal clear. Elena was the help, nothing more. The Montgomery daughters, Victoria and Caroline, had been raised to see Elena as invisible. Victoria was 32, a year older than Elena, poised and perfect in every way. Caroline was 28, equally polished. They had attended private schools, traveled abroad, married well. Elena had scrubbed their toilets 3 months ago. Elena had been cleaning the estate library when she knocked over a box hidden behind old law books. Papers spilled across the floor. Most were boring financial documents, but one caught her eye, a payment receipt. $50,000 to Maria Rivera. The memo line read, "Final settlement for child, Maria Rivera." Elena's mother. Her hands had shaken as she photographed the document with her phone. She had always been told her mother was a troubled woman who couldn't care for her, that the Montgomerys had stepped in out of kindness. But this receipt told a different story. This was a transaction, a purchase. That night, Elena ordered a DNA test online. She spit into the tube, mailed it away, and waited. Waited for answers to questions she had been too afraid to ask her entire life. Now those answers sat in her hands, and they changed everything. She heard her husband Marcus stirring in their bedroom. They had gotten married 4 years ago after he started working as the Montgomery family accountant. He had been charming and attentive, promising her a life outside the mansion walls. But they still lived in a tiny apartment, and Marcus still spent most of his time at the estate, working late into the night. Elena folded the DNA results and slipped them into her purse. She needed to think. She needed to understand what this meant. But one thing was clear. The Montgomerys had lied to her about everything, and she was done being grateful. Elena went through the motions of her day in a daze. She cleaned hotel rooms at the Riverside Inn, the only job she could get with no formal education. Her hands moved automatically, changing sheets, scrubbing tiles, emptying trash. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment of her childhood through this new lens. If she was biologically related to the Montgomerys, then who was her father? James had 3 brothers, all deceased now. Or was it James himself? The thought made her dizzy. James Montgomery had been married to Margaret for 35 years. If he had fathered a child with someone else, that would explain Margaret's cruelty. That would explain why Elena had been kept so close, yet treated so terribly. During her lunch break, Elena sat in her car and pulled up the photographs she had taken of the documents from the library. She studied the payment receipt again. $50,000. The date was 31 years ago, around the time Alana would have been born. She searched online for Maria Rivera, her mother's name. There wasn't much. An obituary from 29 years ago. Maria Elena Rivera, age 26, died of heart failure. Survived by no immediate family. 20-6. Her mother had been only 26 when she died, just 2 years after giving Elena to the Montgomerys. Heart failure. But the obituary made no mention of illness. Elena wondered if her mother's heart had broken from grief. When her shift ended, Elena didn't go home. Instead, she drove to the Montgomery estate. She had a key. Marcus had given it to her for emergencies, but he had asked her not to come by unannounced. Margaret doesn't like visitors. He had said Margaret wasn't home today. Elena had checked the family calendar in the kitchen that morning. Margaret was in New York for a charity gala, and Victoria and Carolyn were with her. The house would be empty except for the minimal staff. Elena parked down the street and walked up the long driveway. The mansion loomed before her, all white columns and perfectly manicured gardens. This had been her prison for 26 years. But if the DNA test was right, it should have been her home. She let herself in through the side entrance and made her way to the library. The box was gone. She searched the shelves, checked behind the books, looked in every corner. Someone had removed it. Panic fluttered in her chest. Had they discovered? She had been looking through their things? Did they know? Then she heard voices. Male voices coming from the study down the hall. One of them was Marcus. Elena moved quietly, her heart pounding. She pressed herself against the wall outside the study door and listened. The transfer went through this morning, Marcus was saying. Another $200,000 into the offshore account. She'd never notice. Good. That was a woman's voice. Cold and familiar. Margaret Montgomery. Elena's blood ran cold. Margaret wasn't in New York. She was here. And Marcus was stealing from the family with Margaret's approval. And Elena? Margaret asked. She still doesn't suspect anything? She's clueless, Marcus said, and Elena heard the contempt in his voice. She thinks I'm working late. She has no idea. Margaret laughed, a brutal sound. Just like her mother. Naive and trusting. Maria thought James would leave me for her. Can you imagine? As if I would let some secretary destroy what I built. Elena's legs nearly gave out. Maria, her mother. James Montgomery had been her father. You played it perfectly, Marcus said. Keeping the girl close, making her a servant in her own father's house. James never figured it out, did he? James was weak, Margaret spat. He suspected near the end, but by then he was dying, and I made sure he never got proof. The girl was already broken by then anyway. Beaten down, grateful for scraps. Elena backed away from the door, her vision blurring with tears. She stumbled down the hallway, out the side entrance, into the cool evening air. She barely made it to her car before she started sobbing. Everything. They had stolen everything from her. Her mother, her father, her childhood, her identity. And Marcus, her husband, was part of it. Had been part of it from the beginning. She drove home on autopilot, parked in front of their apartment building, and sat in the car for a long time. When she finally went inside, Marcus was already there, sitting on the couch, watching television. Hey, babe, he said, barely glancing at her. How was work? Elena looked at him. Really looked at him. The man she had trusted. The man she had married. The man who had called her clueless behind her back while stealing from the family and sleeping with Margaret Montgomery. Fine, she said quietly. Work was fine. She walked to the bedroom and closed the door. Then she sat on the bed and called a lawyer. Attorney Rachel Brennan had kind eyes and a reputation for taking on powerful opponents. Elena sat across from her desk 2 days later, her evidence spread out between them. The DNA results, photographs of the payment receipt, and a recording she had made when she returned to the estate and listened outside the study door again. This is explosive, Rachel said, studying the documents. If this DNA test holds up legally, you're entitled to a significant portion of James Montgomery's estate. As his biological daughter, you have inheritance rights. What about what they did to me? Elena asked. Keeping me as a servant. Lying about who I was. Taking me from my mother. Rachel's expression darkened. That's more complicated. The statute of limitations on most civil claims has likely passed. But we can build a case for emotional damages, especially if we can prove deliberate psychological harm. And the financial fraud, that's recent. That's criminal. My husband, Elena said, her voice breaking on the word. He's been working with Margaret. Stealing money. Then we'll need a forensic accountant to trace the funds. It will be expensive, but if you win this case, you'll have the resources to cover it. Rachel leaned forward. I need to be honest with you, Elena. This will get ugly. The Montgomerys have money and influence. They'll fight dirty. They'll try to destroy your credibility. Are you prepared for that? Elena thought about 26 years of scrubbing floors in her own father's house. She thought about her mother dying at 26, her heart broken. She thought about Marcus's contempt and Margaret's laughter. Yes, she said. I'm prepared. Over the next 6 weeks, Elena lived a double life. During the day, she went to work, came home, made dinner for Marcus, and pretended everything was normal. At night, after he fell asleep, she met with Rachel and the investigative team they had assembled. A private investigator found more evidence of the financial fraud. Marcus and Margaret had been siphoning money from the Montgomery estate for 3 years, hiding it in shell companies and offshore accounts. The total was over $3 million. The forensic accountant traced the paper trail meticulously. Every transaction. Every falsified invoice. Every forged signature. It was all documented, but the hardest evidence to gather was proof of Elena's identity. The DNA test she had taken was consumer grade. For it to hold up in court, they needed a legal test with proper chain of custody. And they needed DNA from James Montgomery. He's been dead for 4 years, Elena told Rachel. How do we get his DNA? Do any of his personal effects still exist? A hairbrush? Clothing? Anything? Elena thought about the master bedroom at the estate. Margaret had kept it exactly as it was when James died, like a shrine. His clothes still hung in the closet. His razor still sat on the bathroom counter. I can get something, Elena said. It was risky. If Margaret caught her, everything would unravel. But Elena had cleaned that house for 26 years. She knew every corner, every hiding place, every routine. She knew Margaret played bridge on Thursday afternoons and never came home before 6. On a Thursday in early November, Elena let herself into the estate. The house was quiet. She moved quickly through the halls, up the grand staircase to the master bedroom. Her heart pounded as she opened the door to James Montgomery's walk-in closet. His suits hung in neat rows. His shoes lined the floor. And on the high shelf, in a leather box, she found what she needed. An old hairbrush with strands of gray hair still caught in the bristles. She took the brush, placed it carefully in a plastic bag, and left the room exactly as she had found it. She was out of the house in less than 10 minutes. The lab results came back 2 weeks later. Paternity confirmed. James Montgomery was Elena's biological father with 99.98% certainty. Rachel filed the lawsuit on a Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, it was all over the news. Montgomery Heir raised as servant. DNA test reveals decades of deception. Socialite accused of fraud and emotional abuse. Elena's phone exploded with calls from reporters. She ignored them all. She stayed home, doors locked, curtains drawn. Marcus came home that evening, his face pale with fury. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted. "Do you have any idea what you've started?" "I know exactly what I started," Elena said calmly. "I'm taking back what's mine." "You're insane. Margaret will destroy you. You'll have nothing." "I already have nothing, Marcus." "You made sure of that." His face twisted. "What are you talking about?" Elena pulled out her phone and played the recording. His voice filled the room, clear and damning. Another 200,000 into the offshore account. She never noticed. The color drained from Marcus's face. "I want a divorce," Elena said. "And if you contest it or cause any problems, I'll make sure the prosecutors know about your role in the fraud. You'll go to prison." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then he grabbed his jacket and walked out. He didn't come back. The Montgomery family fought back with everything they had. Their lawyers filed motion after motion, trying to dismiss the case, discredit the DNA evidence, and paint Elena as a con artist trying to steal the family fortune. Margaret gave a tearful interview to a local news station. "Elena was like a daughter to us," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "We gave her everything. And now she's making these terrible accusations. It's heartbreaking." The public was divided. Some people sympathized with Elena. Others believed Margaret's performance. The story became a media sensation, dissected endlessly on television and social media. Elena stopped reading the comments. She stopped watching the news. She focused on building her case and staying strong. Then, 3 weeks after the lawsuit was filed, someone unexpected knocked on Elena's door. It was Victoria Montgomery. Elena opened the door slowly, her whole body tense. Victoria stood on the doorstep, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, without the designer clothes and perfect makeup Elena was used to seeing. "I know you don't want to see me," Victoria said quietly, "but I need to talk to you, please." Elena considered slamming the door, but something in Victoria's eyes stopped her. She looked genuinely distressed. 5 minutes, Elena said. They sat in Elena's small living room. Victoria looked around at the modest apartment, so different from the mansion they had both grown up, and though their experiences there had been worlds apart. "I found something," Victoria said. She pulled a folder from her purse. "In my mother's safe? I've known the combination for years, but I never looked inside. Until now." She handed the folder to Elena. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, handwritten on yellowed paper. "Dear Margaret," the first one began, "I'm begging you. Please let me see my daughter. Just once. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll go away forever. Just let me see her one more time. Please." The letter was signed Maria. Elena's hand shook as she read through them. Her mother had written to Margaret over and over, pleading to see her child. And Margaret had kept every letter as trophies of her cruelty. "There's more," Victoria said softly. She handed Elena another document. A letter from James Montgomery to Maria Rivera, dated a few weeks before Maria died. "Maria, I know about Elena. Margaret finally told me the truth. I've been a coward and a fool. I should have fought for you. I should have protected our daughter. I'm coming to see you. We'll figure this out together. I promise. Please don't give up. Love always, James." The letter was stamped "Returned to sender." Maria had already died by the time it was delivered. Elena couldn't breathe. Her father had known. He had tried to reach her mother, but Margaret had made sure they never reconnected. And by the time James figured it out, it was too late. "I didn't know," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "I swear, Elena, I didn't know any of this. I thought you were just staff. I thought my parents were generous for taking you in. But this," she gestured to the letters, "this is evil. Why are you showing me this?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because you're my sister," Victoria said. We share a father. We grew up in the same house. And I treated you like you were nobody. I can't change that. But I can help you now. Your mother will disown you. My mother is a monster. I don't want her money. I don't want anything from her. Victoria's voice was fierce. I want to testify. I want to tell the court what I found. I want justice for you and for Maria and for my father, who was too weak to stand up to Margaret, but at least tried at the end. Elena looked at her half-sister, a woman she had served for years without ever knowing they shared blood, a woman who was now offering to risk everything to help her. Okay, Elena said. Thank you. They sat together for a long time, two sisters separated by lies, finally finding common ground in truth. The trial began on a cold morning in January. The courtroom was packed with reporters, spectators, and members of Atlanta's society who had followed the Montgomery scandal with fascination. Elena sat at the plaintiff's table with Rachel beside her. Across the aisle, Margaret Montgomery sat with her team of expensive lawyers, her face a mask of cold fury. The prosecution laid out the case systematically. They presented the DNA evidence proving James Montgomery was Elena's father. They showed the payment receipt to Maria Rivera. They played recordings of Margaret and Marcus discussing the fraud. They brought in forensic accountants to explain the web of financial crimes. Margaret's lawyers tried to discredit everything. They claimed the DNA test was unreliable. They argued that the payment to Maria was for legitimate employment severance. They suggested Elena had falsified the recordings, but then Victoria took the stand. She walked to the witness box with her head held high. Margaret's face went white when she saw her daughter sitting across from her. Please state your relationship to the defendant, the prosecutor said. Margaret Montgomery is my mother, Victoria said clearly, and Elena Rivera is my half-sister. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge called for order. Victoria told the court everything about finding the letters in Margaret's safe, about Maria Rivera's desperate pleas to see her daughter, about James Montgomery's letter that arrived too late, about growing up watching Elena scrub floors while never knowing they shared a father. My mother kept Elena as a servant in her own father's house, Victoria said, her voice breaking. She punished an innocent child for my father's mistake. And she enjoyed it. Every day, she made sure Elena knew she was nothing. But Elena was never nothing. She was my sister. And I'm ashamed it took me 31 years to see it. Margaret's lawyers tried to discredit Victoria, suggesting she was mentally unstable or seeking attention. But Victoria remained calm and steady. She provided documents, photographs, and testimony that corroborated everything Elena had claimed. The next witness was Caroline Montgomery, Victoria's younger sister. She had chosen to side with her mother initially, but after hearing Victoria's testimony, she requested to take the stand. I always wondered why my mother was so cruel to Elena, Caroline said quietly. Now I understand. She was punishing her for existing. And I went along with it because I was taught that Elena was less than us. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. When Marcus took the stand, compelled by subpoena and facing criminal charges, he admitted everything. The affair with Margaret, the financial fraud, the deliberate manipulation of Elena to keep her isolated and controlled. Why did you marry Elena? The prosecutor asked. Marcus looked at the floor. Margaret asked me to. She wanted someone keeping close watch on Elena, making sure she never got curious about her past. It was supposed to be temporary, but then years passed, and I just kept going along with it. Did you ever love her? Marcus hesitated. At first, maybe. A little. But Margaret made it clear that my job was control, not love. Elena felt nothing as she watched him testify. No anger, no sadness. He was just a stranger who had wasted years of her life. The trial lasted 3 weeks. When it finally concluded, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours. guilty on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, emotional abuse, conspiracy. The judge sentenced Margaret Montgomery to 10 years in prison. Marcus received 6 years. The civil damages awarded to Elena exceeded $8 million, including her rightful inheritance from her father's estate, compensation for years of unpaid labor, and punitive damages for emotional harm. But more than the money, more than the conviction, what mattered most to Elena was standing in that courtroom and hearing the judge say, "Elena Rivera Montgomery is the legitimate daughter of James Montgomery and is entitled to all rights and recognition of that status." She had a name now, a real name. She belonged to someone. She came from somewhere. She wasn't just a help anymore. Elena didn't feel the triumph she expected. The night after the sentencing, she sat alone in her apartment and cried. Not tears of joy, but tears of grief. Grief for her mother, who had died believing she was unwanted. Grief for her father, who had figured out the truth too late. Grief for the childhood she never had. Grief for all the years stolen from her. Justice felt hollow. Margaret was in prison, but that didn't bring Maria back. Marcus was gone, but that didn't heal the betrayal. The money was substantial, but it couldn't buy back lost time. Victoria came over the next morning with coffee and pastries. She found Elena still in her pajamas, eyes red from crying. "I thought you'd be celebrating," Victoria said gently. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel," Elena admitted. "I won, but I don't feel like I won. I just feel empty." Victoria sat beside her on the couch. "Revenge doesn't fill the holes people leave in us. It just gives us permission to stop carrying their weight." "Then, what am I supposed to do now?" "Whatever you want. For the first time in your life, you're free to choose." Elena thought about that. For 31 years, other people had dictated her life, her value, her purpose, her identity. Now she had money and recognition and vindication. But she didn't know who she was without the struggle. "I need to learn about my mother," Elena said suddenly. "Not what Margaret told me or what I imagined. The real Maria, who she was before James, who she was when she held me." Victoria squeezed her hand. "Then let's find out together." Over the next 3 months, Elena and Victoria became real sisters. They hired a private investigator to research Maria Rivera's life. They found her childhood home in a small town outside Atlanta. They tracked down former friends and co-workers who remembered her. Maria had been vibrant and full of life, they learned. She loved music and gardening. She was kind to everyone. She had dreams of becoming a teacher. When she started working as a secretary at Montgomery Investments, she had been excited about the opportunity. And then she met James Montgomery. They found photographs. Maria and James together, young and in love, before Harold Montgomery forced them apart. The picture showed a different James from the sad, withdrawn man Elena remembered from the estate. This James was smiling, genuinely happy. "He loved her," Victoria said, looking at one photograph. "I never saw him look like that with our mother." "Margaret must have known," Elena said. "That's why she was so cruel. She knew she was second choice." They found Maria's grave in a small cemetery 20 miles outside the city. The headstone was simple: Maria Elena Rivera, beloved daughter. Nothing about being a mother. Nothing about Elena. Elena knelt in the grass and placed flowers on the grave. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry you died thinking I didn't matter to you. I'm sorry you never got to see me grow up. I'm sorry for everything Margaret took from us." The wind rustled through the trees. Elena closed her eyes and tried to feel her mother's presence. Tried to remember the jasmine scent and the warm arms. Tried to connect with the woman who had loved her enough to beg for one more moment together. "I'm going to make your name mean something," Elena said. "I'm going to help people. I'm going to make sure no other mother loses her child the way you lost me." When she stood up, Victoria was crying too. They held each other in the cemetery, Two sisters mourning the parents they had both lost in different ways. 6 months after the trial ended, Elena stood in front of a new building in downtown Atlanta. The sign above the door read, Maria Rivera Center for Family Advocacy. She had used her settlement money to create a non-profit organization that provided legal services for families torn apart by power, money, or manipulation. They helped mothers fight for custody. They helped children escape exploitative situations. They helped workers who were treated as property instead of people. The grand opening was attended by over 200 people. Social workers, lawyers, journalists, and families who had already been helped by the center's services. Victoria had become the center's operations director, using her business degree and her family's name, now rehabilitated by her testimony, to open doors and secure funding. Caroline volunteered on weekends, working with children in foster care. Elena stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. My mother, Maria Rivera, died at 26 years old believing she was powerless, she began. She believed that money and status meant more than love. She believed that she couldn't fight back against people who had more than her. But she was wrong, because I'm here, and I fought back, and I won. The applause was thunderous. This center exists to help people who feel powerless, people who think they can't fight systems bigger than themselves, people who've been told they don't matter. We're here to tell them they do matter. Their families matter. Their dignity matters, and we're going to help them fight. After the speeches, Elena stood outside and watched people tour the facility. She saw mothers crying with relief when they learned they could get free legal help. She saw children finding safe spaces to play and learn. She saw families beginning to heal. A woman approached her, older, in her 60s, with kind eyes. Elena, I'm Catherine Wells. I knew your mother. Elena's heart skipped. You did? We worked together at Montgomery Investments. I was the other secretary. Maria was my best friend. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. When she got pregnant and Mr. Montgomery left her, I thought she would fall apart. But she was strong. She loved you so much. She talked about you constantly, planned your whole future. She wanted you to be a teacher like she dreamed of being. What happened to her? Elena asked. After I was taken? Catherine's face crumpled. She tried to fight. She hired a lawyer with the money Mrs. Montgomery gave her, but the Montgomerys had better lawyers. She tried to see you, but they had security block her. She came to the estate every single day for months, standing at the gate, hoping to catch a glimpse of you. Then one day she just stopped. Her heart gave out. The doctor said it was a congenital condition, but I knew better. She died of grief. Elena couldn't speak. Catherine pulled her into a hug. Your mother would be so proud of you, Catherine whispered. You did what she couldn't. You fought, and you won. And now you're helping other mothers keep their babies. That's her legacy. That's her dream coming true. When Catherine left, Elena sat on a bench outside the center and let herself cry. Not tears of sadness this time, but tears of release. She had spent so long angry at what had been stolen from her. But now she could see what she still had, her mother's strength, her mother's dreams, her mother's love carried forward into action. 2 weeks later, Elena did something she hadn't planned on doing. She went to visit Margaret Montgomery in prison. Margaret looked smaller behind the glass partition, older. The perfect hair was gray now, the expensive clothes replaced by a prison uniform. But her eyes were still cold. Come to gloat? Margaret asked. No, Elena said. I came to tell you something. I don't want to hear it. I forgive you. Margaret's face twisted with contempt. I don't need your forgiveness. I'm not giving it for you. I'm giving it for me, because I'm done letting you have any power over my life. Elena leaned closer to the glass. You tried to break me. You tried to make me believe I was nothing. But you failed. I'm James Montgomery's daughter. I'm Maria Rivera's daughter. I have their strength and their capacity for love. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that love is stronger than cruelty." Margaret's mask finally cracked. For just a moment, Elena saw something that might have been regret, or maybe just anger at being beaten. "You think you're better than me," Margaret said. "No," Elena replied. "I think I'm free. And you'll never be free again." She stood up and walked away. She didn't look back. 1 year later, Elena stood in a different cemetery. This one was exclusive and expensive, where the Montgomery family had been buried for generations. But today, there was a new grave beside James Montgomery's. Maria Elena Rivera's body had been exhumed from the small public cemetery and reburied here, next to the man she loved. Elena had fought for this, using her legal rights as Maria's daughter and James's heir. She wanted her parents together, the way they should have been in life. The headstone was simple but beautiful. Maria Elena Rivera Montgomery. Beloved mother, forever. Victoria stood beside Elena, along with Carolyn and dozens of people whose lives had been touched by the Maria Rivera Center. They laid flowers on both graves, honoring a love story that had been destroyed by prejudice and cruelty, but ultimately vindicated by truth. "Do you think they would have stayed together?" Victoria asked quietly. "If our grandfather hadn't interfered, if my mother hadn't manipulated everything, I think they would have tried," Elena said. "That's more than most people do." Later that evening, Elena returned to her new home, a modest house with a garden where jasmine grew, filling the air with the scent she remembered from earliest childhood. She had invited Victoria, Caroline, and a few close friends over for dinner. They sat around the table, sharing food and stories and laughter. Elena looked at the faces around her, her sisters by blood and by choice. People who had chosen to stand beside her instead of against her, and felt something she hadn't felt in 31 years. She felt like she belonged. Her phone buzzed with a message from the center. Another family had been reunited with a child who had been taken by a manipulative relative. Another mother would get to hold her baby again because Elena had fought for them. "Everything okay?" Victoria asked. "Everything's perfect," Elena said, and for the first time in her life, she meant it. She had learned that justice wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. Not just of money or status, but of dignity, identity, and the truth that every person matters, regardless of what they've been told. She had been sold to a rich family and treated like property. She had been lied to, manipulated, and nearly destroyed. But she had survived. She had fought. She had won. And now she was using everything she had gained to make sure no other child would ever feel invisible the way she had. Elena Rivera Montgomery was no longer the girl who scrubbed floors. She was a daughter, a sister, an advocate, and a fighter. She was her mother's dream fulfilled and her father's legacy redeemed. She was finally, completely, undeniably free, and the world would never forget her name. The end moral: your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by the truth of who you are. When powerful people try to erase your identity and steal your dignity, the greatest victory is not in revenge, but in reclaiming your name and using your story to lift others from darkness. Family is not just blood. It's those who choose to stand with you when the truth is revealed. And sometimes the most powerful inheritance is not money, but the strength to fight for justice and the courage to transform pain into purpose.